I'm only taking one step at a time towards healing myself. I had to get out, I found a way out. No more living in pain or misery. It's all about protecting my energy. Keep the negative away from me, because I am just keeping my peace. Cut off everything that no longer was serving me, and I chose to start loving myself. I walk in my purpose, no looking back, I'm only going with it. B.O. standing there, a better version of me. I must say that I'm proud of me. It's not about how you feel, I'm living proof that God is real. So let me show you how to heal. Damn it, I'm wearing it well, cause I came a long way. My journey isn't yet complete, that's what it look like to heal. Damn it, I'm wearing it well, I'm proud of myself. It's nothing to it, you can do it, all you gotta do is just fight through it. Create a soul, create a soul, create a soul. Just fight through it. Create a soul, create a soul, create a soul, create a soul, yeah, yeah.
Welcome to Pain to Purpose podcast, where we have open discussions to heal together as a community. Today, we're on episode 50, yay! And we are talking about mental health and wellness with Daniel G. Welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and have a nice discussion with you about this topic.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. We do not take it for granted when people come over to our podcast and take time out of their day to educate us. So thank you so much. And give us a little background about you.
Yeah, for sure. So I am a licensed clinical social worker in both Wisconsin as well as in Colorado. And I have a private practice in Wisconsin. I actually started in Colorado and moved it when we moved back. But so now it's based in Wisconsin, but I still see some folks in Colorado virtually. But really my practice really is focused on helping men heal from trauma, from stress, from overwhelm, some of those societal impacts that a lot of men carry with them and maybe never address, or maybe they will address it at some point when maybe things get too intense or too bad in their lives. But that's kind of what my practice focuses on. And then I got into this work because of my own kind of run-in with a traumatic brain injury from an auto accident. So that has been kind of what kind of guided me to this work.
Okay. So I have some questions over here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask them as we continue to have this conversation.
For sure.
And so you already just told us that you've dealt with some mental health from your car accident and everything.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
I mean, I think at first, like whenever something overwhelming happens, at least for me, and probably for quite a lot of people, right? There's like this initial like shock or daze that happened, and mine was pretty intense in terms of a traumatic brain injury. Had to have brain surgery, had a stroke in my left prefrontal cortex or my left prefrontal lobe, and then fractured skull, collapsed lung. And, it's kind of at this point of like, the doctors are like, we don't know if he's even going to make it. So we just have to do this surgery and maybe wait and see. Right. Like, we don't know. But so after like coming out of the chemically induced coma, it was kind of like days, right? It took me a little while to like figure out what was actually going on, how bad was it, right? Because I was laying in a bed. It's not like I could see that like I had staples on the side of my head or anything like that. So it wasn't probably until I'd say like, well, I knew it was bad in the ICU. I was in there for 10 days when the doctor is like, we don't know if you're going to graduate your senior year with the cohort that you started with. And I was like, I will, but it was just kind of like maybe being like a rebellious, like, old teenager at that point, 17-year-old, like young, coming into adulthood, of still having some of that like feistiness, or like, rebuking the system, if you will, or bucking the system. And then, them saying like, you're probably going to have to relearn how to walk and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, like, this might be worse than what I think it is. But I didn't have to. I had to walk my first few times with a lot of support, nurses like holding onto a wheelchair and stuff, like staff close by me. But overall, some of those things, move forward, and then did 10 days ICU, 7 days inpatient rehab, and then 3 months physical therapy and 17 months of speech therapy. So that was
So mentally,
the journey.
how are you now with having to go through all of that?
Mm-hmm.
And then now you sit with people that go through trauma.
Yeah, it brings up a lot of empathy, right? Because like you can empathize with somebody, but you can never really know like what are they going through internally. It's so
Right.
unique to every person. And just as a TBI or traumatic brain injury is very unique, even a similar injury for somebody can be vastly different than what it might be for you. So I think there's this level of, meeting the person where they're at, this ability to really empathize and connect, attune with, maybe their nervous system's dysregulated, or connecting and even helping them just regulate their nervous system, because sometimes people come in and even trying to regulate the nervous system is almost like a trauma response, because when their nervous system's regulated, that's when a lot of the trauma actually happened.
Okay.
Right. So you use it as a tool, right, to meet people, but I can't say like, I went through this, you're going to go through a similar experience in a traumatic brain injury recovery situation.
Okay, so I gotta ask this question,
Mm-hmm.
and men out there, do not get mad at me, but I have to ask this question because as women, we want to know: do you think that well, you see this all the time, but do you feel like a lot of men are not healed from past trauma, like childhood trauma, and it affects their mental health? Or do you think it's an overall thing?
Mm. That's a big question. And I don't know what the current research is on it right now,
Mhm.
but I think it's probably both. I think there's people who have experienced childhood trauma, and it's something that is with them daily, right? And then there are also people who've experienced childhood trauma but have been able to suppress it or repress it to such a level that it maybe only comes up like once in a blue moon. And then they're able to kind of put it back down in terms of compartmentalization. Right. And I think you see it quite a bit with, and this is not childhood trauma, but like war veterans, they'll start seeking therapy 30, 40, 50 years after they saw combat or something horrific happen. That's
Okay.
because they've been able just to white knuckle it, or keep it at bay with substance use, or other avoidant tendencies that they might have developed, right?
So I've heard men say that they don't want to go to counseling, or they
Mm-hmm.
don't want to get therapy. They don't believe in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is?
The societal stigma that is still in our society around like men asking for help, men asking support is definitely still there, even though we are starting to see some shifts with like higher profile people. I think a couple of years ago there was or a year and a half ago, there was a senator that checked himself in for depression at an inpatient facility.
Mhm.
So I think you're starting to see higher level conversations
Okay.
starting to break into this sphere. But I also think that there's this culture, just kind of keep going. You don't need to pay attention to this. Just keep providing, just keep doing and whatever it is, except it's almost like a Y in the road. It's like as you keep doing that, you just kind of keep disconnecting from yourself. And then like sometimes what I see is actually partners or family members will reach out for that person and say, "Hey, I think my family member needs therapy. Could you just have a conversation with them?"
Okay.
Right? So sometimes it's just the support network or the friendship network that will reach out.
Now, is there like support groups for men where men can actually get together and they can see that they're not alone?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, oof, I see them online almost every other day being mentioned, like online grief group for fathers or men, just recovery networks or military groups, right? It just kind of finding the niche that you want is an important part to finding some identity in that too, right? Because you want to have some sort of relatability factors that's going in.
Now, do you think that it's too much pressure being put on men for them to be strong to where they're not vulnerable enough to show emotion because of society or
Mhm.
because of what people think men should ultimately be?
Yeah, I think in my opinion, right? Like not looking at research or anything, just from what I've seen, I think it's probably a culmination of the societal factors. It's the factor of I can't take a break because if I take a break, like my family won't be able to make rent or pay bills, right? And they're just kind of like trapped in a vicious cycle.
So it's more like they're just on the go.
Hmm.
They're feeling a certain way in their mind, their
Hmm.
body, but they're just on a go because they know they have to be that provider, that
Yeah.
protector, that
Yeah, and I've seen it too. I do some couples work, but only like couples work around like infidelity or if mental illness is impacting the relationship dynamic, and sometimes too like what I've seen is that and not just with men, but also with females or partners, but it can certainly be with men, and we're talking about men, but sometimes there's just that disconnect that just grows over time
okay,
between like the man and their emotions or their ability to connect and have intimate conversations with their partner or loved ones or friends, and they lose that ability to just be vulnerable because of this like constant go go go. That almost just starts to dysregulate the nervous system, or because they're repressing or suppressing emotions or memories, right? It just kind of creates a divide, and as that divide grows, people often start seeing like, oh, these issues in my life just kind of repeat
right.
over and over, and I don't know why. And that's where therapy usually comes in and being like, let's just be very curious with some of these things.
So men that may be a little nervous about going to therapy for the first time, what would you suggest? Like, what would be the go-to for them?
Hmm. So I would say like,
Or even like the coping skills even after going to therapy?
yeah. So I think the first thing, like if somebody's thinking about jumping into therapy, is most therapists offer a free 15 to 20-minute consultation call. And yeah, it's not a full session and it's usually free, but you can get a vibe on somebody if you're gonna jive with them, right? And then give it a shot. Remember too, it's your therapy. So if you're not clicking with your therapist a few sessions in, then you can also find another therapist. Like you're not contractually bound to working with this individual. So remember, like you have autonomy, you have choice, right? You have freedom to jump or to market to go out into the market and find other therapists, right? I think after therapy, it depends. Sometimes the first few sessions are just like almost just like they're just building rapport, getting to know one another. So they're not very heavy. But
Right.
once, if there's trauma work, if there's like, doing some deeper emotional stuff like grief and loss or infidelity, uh, sometimes that can be pretty draining and exhausting. So maybe keeping an hour or two afterwards to just maybe take a break or go get a coffee or eat a food that really is soothing for your body, whatever that might be, right? Or going for a walk along the lake. Kenosha, Wisconsin is right by Lake Michigan, so we're right there. So using some of that natural beauty to help regulate the woods, flowers, gardening, all that
Okay.
is huge.
Okay. Now, what do you think would be easier, for or easy way for men to open up about their struggles?
What would be an easy way for men to open up about their struggles? So that's a difficult question to answer because it's going to be undoing any of the defense mechanisms that are keeping them from opening up, right? And most of the time, people don't know what they're doing, right? Because it's usually unconscious. So, in regards to that, it would just be taking the first step and reaching out to a therapist, and then just talking, just to see how that goes, right? And even if it's just kind of normal chit chat, there will be pieces that show up, right? That like a therapist can grab and go deeper. So for example, like if somebody comes to therapy and they're like, yeah, like things are going pretty good in my life, but my boss is always on me for the quality of my work. And then the therapist, and this is just hypothetical, but the
Right, right.
therapist could grab that and say, oh, like like, so if he's constantly on you, like what do you notice in your body when he's nitpicking? Right, what emotions show up? He's like, oh, like I feel like he's being very self-critical, right? And then you can just kind of like work through some of those little pieces to start saying like, oh, I wonder, is there more there, right? Like how long is that? Is it only this boss? Or is it other bosses that you've worked with throughout your life? Right. So you can kind of just like peel back the layers slowly.
Okay. And what has helped you on your journey? Like, um, what's helped you the most during your journey?
Like in my recovery process.
Mhm.
So family support was big, massive. Um, Also, I started working out as soon as the doctor cleared me to getting back into the gym. So that was very big. Started going for walks. I was actually in the car accident with the person, or the car accident I was in the person with. I started going for walks with him again. So it was just a one car rollover, and we were close before, and then we stayed connected afterwards because it was an accident. It wasn't like because of alcohol use or something like a deer or anything like that. I was just not paying attention and something happened. So I think healing and connection is very important. Um, Taking time, and I mean, I even struggle with this today, but more so back then was like having the patience to allow your body to heal versus like needing to pressure everything and have done like in 3 years what you want done in one day.
I
Right.
think a lot of us, even women, deal with that just in goals and life in itself. It's like we want it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it might be just like a human drive, right? Like
Mhm.
we have a lot of instant gratification in our world today, right? Like you got 2-day Amazon Prime shipping, all these different things, Netflix,
We're
you can just
talking about Amazon now.
I'm not saying it's bad or good.
No.
I'm just saying we live in the world of like we can just go on our phone and stream Netflix, right? We can
Yeah.
go on our laptop, stream Netflix. We can put on the smart TV, stream Netflix. We don't need to like go to a movie theater or wait for a movie release because like we could just pay $3 extra and maybe have it a week earlier or whatever it is, right? And so then you have these experiences in the world that literally say you can't supersede this process.
It's not like Amazon.
I know. Yeah. I mean, it's not like tech, right? Or whatever it is. So then you're just sitting in this, and then so wrestling with that acceptance can be really, really difficult. Or wrestling with that loss that you experience because of something, even though you had it before, but you don't have it now, and you don't know if you'll have it in the future, right?
Okay.
So, like, you're kind of forced into these places, and it's that forced acceptance, and then as soon as it can turn into just like gentle acceptance, and sometimes people find it with like prayer or working out or spirituality or yoga, whatever it might be, right? But and that's the thing is, I don't know what will work for everyone. Like, you have to try them.
Everybody's different.
Yeah, you have to try them to figure it out.
So how can we create as a community, how can we create more spaces for men to feel
Mhm,
more vulnerable, to feel safe,
mhm,
um, to express how they feel?
mhm. Yeah, and that's something that's really interesting because I go back and forth with, like, I think support groups are really cool. They're also not bound by confidentiality. And I think that
Mhm.
that can be a barrier, right? Of
So if a man goes into a support group and he says how he feels, he's open in this space,
mhm.
it can still be talked about outside the room.
Well, yeah, anytime there's more than one person, right? Like,
Well,
even
it's not like going to the doctor where it's
right, right.
confidential.
Yeah, and I don't have a way. I haven't been able to figure out a way to make that more secure in
Okay.
terms of a support group, right? But you do see, like, from just a cultural perspective, like when you look at Native people, how they heal, how they take care of their communities, right? It's usually in groups, or even more, let's see, what is it, more Eastern cultures, or what, yeah, I guess it depends where you're looking, but more like Asian cultures, or people of color, like some of their ability to heal from, like, community or communal trauma is
Yeah.
vastly different than what we do in the United States, and it's often quite a bit more effective,
Okay.
right? Through, maybe it's chanting, or just even like synchronized, like, body movements in, like, a communal space, right? And, like, showing that, like, you're not alone. It's huge. And then most of those cultures also have more of a awareness around mental health too, or stress. Maybe it's not called mental health, right? But it's like, this is a big impact on our community, so we need to come together, right? And I think that some of those things are fascinating, and some of those things are being explored. There was a book I read back in, like, 20, was it maybe 2011, 12, 13, and it was a military book, and it was Expanding the Circle of Healing was the title. And it was I
Mhm.
believe it was a pilot program for vets coming back. um, and it was like 3 or 4 to 5 men would go out into the wilderness and would go whitewater rafting, and, like, it would almost like simulate the camaraderie you would need in battle, to, like,
Okay.
sleep outside, to start fires, to survive, right? And they would use that with a therapist, and then they would start to build that community and that trust and that dependence, and then the camaraderie, and they would be able to talk about some of the stuff that they've been struggling with, right? But that's not just a support group you go to on a Sunday because you have free time, right? Like, that is a very tight support group that's being
That's
created.
work.
Yeah. So, can it be done? I think definitely. It's just, I don't know about the logistics of using or having men that maybe weren't in the military, right, or aren't on police forces or firefighter squads, right, and then trying to put them together.
So I have to ask you this.
Mhm.
If there was two things that you could change when it comes to mental health for men, what would it
Mhm.
be?
Ooh, that's a good question. Two things you would change for mental health. What would they be?
Well, we know the stigma is one. We
Yeah.
all wish that people would not
Mm-hmm.
look at people a certain way because of the mental illness that they're dealing
Yeah.
with. I really wish that we could change that.
Mm-hmm. And I think the stigma is like what society puts on it, right? I think that the other thing that I would change then would be like men's um men's own reflection or internalization of that stigma in terms of saying like it's okay for me to go see a therapist or to go ask for help or support. Like, because the stigma is external, right? Coming on to somebody. So, like, the second part of that would be changing how do men internalize that stigma to a way that they could then say, you know what, like, whatever explicit words you want to throw in there and say, like, I'm going.
Right, right, right.
Mm-hmm.
So before we close out, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
So one thing I love kind of just sharing in terms of a message is that like we no matter where we are in our lives, we're all, and some of us probably already have, depending on how old you are, but we're all going to be hit with some sort of adversity in our lives, be it loss, be it trauma, be it whatever. But it's how we use that to inform our values, inform our character, and like how that forms our character that then will propel us to find our values, find our dreams, chase our passions, whatever it is, and also not care what other people think. Because once you're living your passion, like there's a lot of self-confidence that comes with it. There's a lot of fulfillment and also a lot of energy that comes with it that gets unlocked when you're on that road. So I just challenge everybody to either if they have been or are going through it, right? If they're going through adversity, how do you use it, right? What can you pull from it, even though it is pain? What is it trying to teach you or help you grow in some capacity?
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
And
thank you for having me.
you're welcome, educating us and giving us your point of view. We really appreciate it. And feel free to come back onto the show again for another topic. Just let
Yeah,
us know.
I would love to be here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. For our audience, don't forget we have our Pain to Purpose podcast shirt still and our tumblers. We do have a website now. It is www.paintopurpose.podcast.com. So it's www.paintopurposepodcast.com. You can go on there. You can book one-on-one coaching. If you are wanting to write a book and you don't know where to start for the first time, you can book that as a service. You can also see the podcast shirts, the tumblers, and the books that I have available all on the website. One stop shop. You can also fill out the form so that you too can be on the podcast for a topic that you would like to see the community heal from. Thank you for joining us. Remember, it's only pain until you discover your purpose and begin your healing journey. We'll see you next time. Bye.